When you hear the name Joanna Moore, do you think of her beauty, her talent, or the shocking scandal that rocked her life? Behind the glamour and drama that captivated fans was a story shaped by a heartbreaking beginning. One that was far from glamorous and might even bring a tear to your eye. Joanna Moore didn't always have her legendary name. As a matter of fact, her name used to be Dorothy Joanne Cook, and she had a rough start in life. So why did she have to change her name? You see, after losing her family in a car crash when she was just 7, Moore was left with no one except her grandmother. But that didn't last long. Her grandmother was elderly and soon unable to care for her, leaving Moore once again without a stable home. That's when a local family stepped in and adopted her, with one condition. She had to change her name from Joanne to Joanna. And so, she became Joanna Moore, ready for the next chapter in her life. But things took a dramatic turn when Joanna was just 16. She left her new home and family behind, married a guy named Willis Moore, another teen, and unsurprisingly, the marriage didn't last. By the time she was 17, she was divorced, but now with the name Joanna Moore for good. She decided to focus on her future and enrolled at Agnes Scott College, where she quickly gained attention, not for her grades, but for her looks. It wasn't long before she entered the Georgia Beauty Contest and won, a victory that led her straight to Hollywood. Her arrival in Tinseltown started with a cocktail party, just like in the movies. At this party, a producer spotted Joanna and offered her a screen test. The next thing she knew, she was signed by Universal Studios. Hollywood was finally giving her a shot. She started landing roles in TV shows, but her first big film didn't go well at all. Her movie Appointment with a Shadow was poorly received, with critics calling it forgettable. That had to sting, but it didn't stop her. Joanna tried to keep her career moving, but her personal life continued to be a roller coaster. She married actor Don Ulrich, and at first, it seemed like the perfect union, and nothing could come between them. But again, the marriage was short-lived, ending in just a year. Joanna's focus shifted back to her career, but the films that followed didn't do much better. She had small roles in movies like Slim Carter, a goofy western, and some film noir projects, but nothing that really made her stand out. Rather than give up, Joanna went back to what had worked for her before: cocktail parties. She wasn't giving up on Hollywood yet, and even though she had some setbacks, she was determined to find the role that would turn her career around. She knew that in this business, it wasn't just about talent, it was about being in the right place at the right time, and Joanna Moore was ready to make her own luck. In 1962, Joanna Moore finally landed a role that allowed her to showcase her talents in a more meaningful way. The film was Walk on the Wild Side, and while her role as Miss Precious, a neurotic woman of the night, was still small, it had the potential to leave a lasting impact. In fact, Moore later admitted that she received more fan letters for this performance than for any of her other roles. This film may not have been a critical success, but it did help her gain some attention in Hollywood, setting her up for bigger things. But the drama in Moore's life was only just beginning. When she found love and became a bride, things didn't go as well as she'd hoped. Soon enough, she found herself in the middle of a huge and shocking scandal, and it had everything to do with an affair between her and the great Elvis Presley. Joanna Moore's involvement with Elvis Presley created a scandal so sensational it seemed to come straight out of a Hollywood melodrama. The affair began on the set of Follow That Dream in 1962, a film that saw Moore playing opposite Presley. At first, it was nothing more than a fleeting Hollywood romance, just another affair between two stars. But Moore, who had her own troubled past, became obsessed with the king of rock and roll. When Presley ended the affair, Moore couldn't let go. Her emotional state spiraled. She showed up at Presley's house, demanding to see him, only to be turned away by his bodyguard, Joe Esposito. But that didn't stop Moore. In a desperate bid to regain Presley's attention, she claimed she had taken a bunch of sleeping pills. To make matters even more dramatic, Moore told Esposito that she was pregnant with Presley's child. Whether or not that was true remains unclear, but the effect was the same. Her behavior had become erratic and unsettling. Esposito, fearing for Moore's well-being, took her to the hospital, where doctors pumped her stomach to clear the drugs from her system. Presley, perhaps realizing that Moore's attachment had gone far beyond a typical fling, cut ties with her for good. The episode became a public spectacle, and Moore's reputation for emotional instability was cemented. She had crossed a line that no amount of Hollywood glamour could erase, and the press had a field day with the scandal. For Moore, this was just another chapter in a life marked by turbulent relationships and struggles with addiction. But the Elvis scandal was the most dramatic and one of the most publicized. It was a moment when Hollywood's perfect starlet image cracked, revealing a woman caught in her own personal demons and a whirlwind romance that would leave her marked by the press for years to come. The scandal played out in the public eye, with the media quickly turning it into a sensational story. Elvis's personal life was already closely scrutinized, and the idea that he had been involved with another actress, especially in such a volatile way, only added to his controversial image. As for Moore, the attention wasn't entirely the kind that could boost a career. Hollywood was notoriously unforgiving, and this episode painted her as unstable, a label that stuck. Despite having gained some recognition with her role in Walk on the Wild Side, where she played a memorable neurotic character, the scandal put her under a harsher spotlight. Though she had the chance to work with high-profile stars like Elvis, the aftermath of the affair and her erratic behavior overshadowed her career opportunities. Afterward, Moore's career didn't gain the momentum she hoped for, and her public image was now tainted by her association with the king. The scandal's fallout impacted both her personal and professional life, making her more of a cautionary tale in Hollywood. But on the bright side, she eventually found love and got married, though even that led to more and more drama. Joanna Moore's marriage to Ryan O'Neal in 1963 was supposed to be the start of a beautiful chapter in her life, but instead, it became one of the most complicated and tumultuous relationships in Hollywood at the time. The couple's love story was a whirlwind, marked by passion, infidelities, and eventually, addiction, which deeply affected both their professional and personal lives. The two first met while Moore was in the midst of her own career struggles, but they quickly became a Hollywood power couple. They had 2 children together, Griffin and Tatum O'Neal, and their family was in the public eye, despite the turbulence at home. Unfortunately, Ryan O'Neal's infidelities were a constant strain on their relationship. Moore was dealing with her own demons, especially her growing struggles with alcohol. It wasn't long before the tension reached a breaking point, and the couple's marriage was severely affected by these issues. As their marriage went through several separations and reconciliations, it became clear that addiction was at the heart of their troubles. O'Neal's infidelities didn't help matters, but Moore's issues with drinking and erratic behavior were just as damaging. She later reflected on how her addiction had become a huge part of the narrative in her life, and though she did her best to fight it, the addiction took a significant toll on her relationship with O'Neal. Their public relationship and marriage went through cycles of falling apart and then coming back together. At one point, Moore even handed over custody of their children to O'Neal, recognizing she needed help more than she needed to fight to keep them. Her personal battles were affecting her ability to care for them, and she made the painful decision to check herself into a hospital in hopes of getting clean, which was a turning point in her life. But worst of all, the addictions became a scandal in itself. In one infamous incident, she was reportedly found passed out in her car after a night of drinking, prompting widespread media coverage. This was seen as the breaking point for her career. Hollywood, already wary of her personal issues, began to pull back from offering her roles. Her addiction had led to missed opportunities and a string of failed professional relationships. The media's portrayal of a wild, uncontrollable figure, fueled by addiction, did little to help her image. The public was already aware of her past, including her earlier affair with Elvis Presley, and her emotional breakdown following their fling. As she continued to spiral, the press painted her as a woman whose career was ruined by her inability to control her personal demons. This narrative overshadowed any professional accomplishments she had, and ultimately led to her being largely forgotten by Hollywood. In the 1960s, actresses like Moore were often not afforded the same kind of redemption or second chances that male stars might receive. Instead of focusing on her talent, the industry and the media chose to highlight her emotional volatility, turning her into a tragic figure in the public's eye. The narrative became one of a beautiful woman who couldn't manage her personal demons, and Hollywood, rather than offering her help, distanced itself from her. This kind of treatment was sadly typical for many actresses of her time, and it wasn't until much later that the conversation surrounding addiction and mental health started to shift. In the 1970s and 1980s, as the Me Too movement and greater awareness around mental health grew, the way Hollywood treated actors and actresses dealing with addiction began to evolve. Joanna Moore's final on-screen appearance came with Scout's Honor in 1980, a TV movie commemorating the Boy Scouts' 70th anniversary. The film centered around Gary Coleman, then a breakout star from Different Strokes, playing a young scout with Katherine Helmond as his reluctant den mother. The story has a nostalgic charm, fitting for a lighthearted take on Boy Scout values. Joanna Moore and MASH's Harry Morgan both appear in small but memorable roles, adding a touch of classic TV charm. Though often regarded as a corny tribute, Scout's Honor remains a vintage gem that resonates with longtime fans of these iconic actors. Today, Moore is remembered not only for her acting, but also as an example of how Hollywood's treatment of its stars, particularly women, has changed. In modern times, there's a much more empathetic approach to celebrities facing addiction and mental health struggles. More resources are available, and the stigma is starting to lift. Yet, Moore's story remains a reminder of the industry's harsh judgment and the toll that it took on her legacy. While she did have a promising start, addiction and the scandals surrounding her marriage to O'Neill have shaped how she is viewed today. Instead of focusing solely on her performances, many remember her for the public spectacle of her life. A life that, in many ways, was tragically overshadowed by her struggles.